Donald Trump, our wannabe dictator president, who I guess thinks threatening to start World War III is some kind of substitute for actual diplomacy. Honestly, it's probably the most terrifying and at the same time the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. It's just wow. Okay. So where do we even start? We have to start with like the crown jewel of this whole mess, which is some audio that just came out. And this audio, it apparently comes from a private fundraiser. You know, one of those places where Trump was just schmoozing with his wealthiest donors. He's trying to explain why he's trying to make it seem like Putin fears him, and the story he tells is just, well, you really have to hear it to believe it. So, yeah, this is what Trump, the great deal maker, is saying when he thinks no one's listening. I'm just going to play you the clip. It's from some new book. The author's got the audio.
With Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, we're going to bomb the shit out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants it. The public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way. And I said, way. And then he goes like, I don't believe you. But the truth is, he believed me 10%. And I told you this, he believed me 10%. Then I'm with President Xi of China. But I said the same thing to them. I said, if you go into Taiwan, I'm going to bomb the shit out of Beijing. He thought I was crazy. He said, Beijing? You're going to bomb Beijing? I said, I have no choice. I got to bomb them. We're going to bomb Beijing. And he didn't believe me either, except 10%. And 10% is all you need. In fact, 5% would have been okay too. And we never had a problem. We would have never had a problem.
I mean, way? He actually said, way? Damn. This guy, this total moron, he actually thinks he's some kind of tough guy in a movie or something. Not, the so-called leader of the free world with his finger on the nuclear button. This is the Madman theory in its purest, most pants, shittingly terrifying form, coming from a guy who is, well, an actual lunatic. He believed him 10%, and that's a good thing? Is he serious? This narcissistic sociopath he's openly admitting that his entire foreign policy, his doctrine, it's all based on the hope, I guess, that other nuclear powers think he's just maybe unhinged enough to, incinerate the entire planet. And that 10% is all you need. It's like he thinks this is some kind of poker game or something, the absolute imbecile. But these are the lives of millions we're talking about, and you're treating it with the strategic depth of a toddler threatening to hold their breath until they get a cookie. So, okay, how's that brilliant strategy working out for him now, right? Well, from what I'm reading, the transcript, it makes it pretty clear that Vladimir Putin isn't exactly, shaking in his boots. In fact, he seems to be, I don't know, almost enjoying making Trump look like a complete and utter fool. Let's hear what one of the commentators had to say about the whole dynamic between these two power-hungry figures. This part, it really gets to the core of Trump's motivation, and spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with what's good for America, or the world for that matter. Here is a quote from the analysts.
America. And Josh Jossi, you obviously have covered Trump along with me for years now. Given the audio of what you heard the president saying about Putin then, I wonder what you made of how fed up he seemed with him today.
Well, I think what he was trying to tell the donors there, Caitlin, was that he could have deterred this. He could have stopped this. You heard him say on the campaign trail, if you reelect me, I can stop this immediately. And it's clear Vladimir Putin has not been listening to what Trump wants, right? I mean, Trump says, I've been doing all these calls, they're frustrating. Today he unleashed a profanity as he was sort of describing what he thought of Vladimir Putin and what he was doing. But what you see in that tape is Trump behind closed doors to his richest donors in New York, telling them, you know, I had control over these guys, basically espousing the Madman theory, right? They thought I was just crazy enough that maybe I would have done something if they crossed me. And I used that to basically get them to do what I wanted them to do. And I think what the frustration you're seeing now from President Trump, you know, we've reported he says Vladimir Putin has changed. He makes all of these comments in private about how he used to think he had a better relationship with Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin's just not listening to him. Putin's not listening to what Trump wants him to do.
Yeah, I mean, and Isaac, when Trump was running, and obviously that is a deep part of the book, is what the Trump campaign looked like internally, as well as the Biden-Harris campaign. But when he was running, the argument that he made to voters was, I can fix this. I can handle this. You know, Putin is scared of me and intimidated by me, as Josh mentioned there. And now here we are, that he's been in office for several months and is realizing that Putin isn't showing a lot of interest in getting the deal that Trump wants here.
Well, more often than Putin being scared of him, it was, you know, Putin was someone he had a good relationship with. And Trump has often talked about Putin as someone who could make a deal with, you know, that they could find some common ground. And a lot of Russia specialists in the U.S. national security establishment looked at that and said, you know, Putin is not interested in improving relations with the West. He wants nothing to do with the West. It just doesn't work that way. You can just give him what he wants and he's going to go home. That's not a way to resolve this war. And Trump is finding that out the hard way now that he's 6 months into past due on his promise for that war to be over. And
I mean, of course, it's about his ego. What else would it be about? This total phony, he doesn't give a damn about, you know, Ukrainian sovereignty or international law. Nope. He only cares that Putin is making him look like the weak, ineffectual, well, the puppet he truly is. This whole thing, it's just a pissing match between two wannabe strongmen, and we're all just supposed to what? Stand by and watch? And this personal humiliation, right? This obsession with his own image, it bleeds into everything. And that's how you get an administration that's a complete unmitigated disaster of incompetence. I mean, seriously, if you thought the chaos couldn't possibly get any worse, you have to look at how they're handling military aid to Ukraine. You would think, I mean, you would hope that a decision about sending weapons to a major ally during a war would maybe possibly involve, I don't know, the president. But in Trump's America, that's apparently asking way too much. Here is what a reporter in the clip learned about the chain of command, or the complete lack of one.
But you've learned what happened. Yeah, Aaron, so my colleague Zach Cohen and I are getting a little bit of a better sense of the timeline here and just how all of this played out. What we're told is that Secretary of Defense Hegseth did not actually inform the White House prior to approving that pause on the weapons shipments. And that pause actually came about because President Trump last month, when he was on a trip to NATO with Secretary of Defense Hegseth, with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, he asked them for essentially a state of play when it comes to the U.S. weapons stockpiles because, of course, Iran and Israel were attacking each other and U.S. troops in the Middle East were put at risk. And so he essentially wanted an assessment of, hey, do we have enough in the region in order to protect U.S. troops if they need to defend themselves? But Secretary of Defense Hegseth then kind of delegated that request down to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Albridge Colby, who ultimately himself...
Just let that sink in for a second. The White House, the National Security Advisor, and the president himself, they found out that the United States had just on its own paused critical weapon shipments to an ally from the news, from the damn news. This is like government by raging inferno, a level of incompetence so profound. It's genuinely, like, it's hard to even wrap your head around. I have worked at fast food joints with a clearer and more respected chain of command than this clown car of an administration. And look, you don't have to take my word for how absolutely astonishing this is. Here is what David Axelrod, who, knows a thing or two about how a White House is supposed to function, had to say.
Astonishing. I mean, I'll yield to General Clark, who's got a much richer and deeper grasp of military history than I do. But I will tell you from my years in the White House, the idea that a decision like that would be taken on a matter of such import and obviously in a critical place without the National Security Advisor being informed and the President of the United States is beyond belief to me. And if I were the president, I'd be furious about that.
But Trump isn't furious, is he? I mean, probably not. No, he plays dumb in a cabinet meeting or something because this chaos, this is exactly what he cultivates. It's what he wants, General Clark, he hit the nail on the head later in the clip. The defense secretary probably thought he was just following the president's real priorities, which have always been to, coddle Putin and screw our allies. This whole mess is the logical endpoint of a government run by a coward who can't even issue a direct order. He just spews rhetoric and all this contradictory nonsense, and then his spineless underlings have to guess what he wants, and they're just hoping they don't get fired for guessing wrong. So now that he's been, publicly humiliated by Putin, he's suddenly decided to talk tough. We're seeing him finally use some harsh language trying to sound like the strongman he pretended to be at that fundraiser. But as the analysts in the clip rightly point out, does this sudden burst of profanity actually mean anything? Here is Trump's new tune and, well, the perfectly skeptical reaction.
And his long history has said the opposite. So what he said today was very significant about Putin. Here it is again.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
So,
yeah,
David, what do you think this means?
Yeah. I don't know what it means because the president hasn't been very consistent on a lot of different things. This is stunning because he has been so defensive of Putin and on a lot of issues. I mean, we stood up for them at the UN. We haven't applied additional sanctions, though the Congress wants to. We put higher tariffs on Ukraine, but not Russia. There's been a lot of rhetoric from the president, but he's not done anything, as the general said. So what this means now, we don't know. His language, if you listen to it, was we need to send them some. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I think the Ukrainians are anxious to find out.
So what does it mean? It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. You think this is some big policy change? No. It's just the pathetic flailing tantrum of a grifter who got played by his handler. This is the sound of a puppet realizing his master cut the strings and is now laughing at him from across the world stage. Look, don't get it twisted. This is not some kind of ideological battle. What it is, it's a pissing match between two big dogs, as the video says, and America's so-called leader is the one getting soaked. We are living in a world shaped by this man's fragile ego, and it's a damn dangerous place to be. So we have this complete loose cannon in the White House, and his foreign policy, it seems like it's dictated not by, national security. No, that would make too much sense, but by whether or not his feelings are hurt on any given day. He's a wannabe dictator whose blustering threats are really just a cover for the fact that he's a weak, easily humiliated buffoon being played on the world stage. What do you all think? I mean, does hearing this audio make your skin crawl, or have we just reached the point where this level of insanity is just expected? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I really want to hear what you have to say. If you appreciate someone, you know, cutting through the noise and calling out this total catastrophe for what it is, do me a solid and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It costs you nothing, and it's really the best way to help fight back against the algorithm and make sure more people see this stuff. All right, that's all for me today. Stay angry, stay engaged, and never ever let these autocratic types convince you this is normal. I'll see you in the next one.